Hello, fellow Americans. This is Mr. Steffler coming to you from room 111 here at Clintondale Middle School. And we're here today to talk about the Chapter 1 test having to do with the writing of the Constitution. The pages that you need to read in your 8th grade textbook are pages 10 through 23, but that's already been on the agenda. That's like 2 weeks old. We were supposed to have read this already. So if you have not read or probably need to reread those pages, let's get on that and do that tonight and make sure that everything's been read so that you can do a good job on tomorrow's test. So first of all, let's talk about the learning targets. Target 1, we talked about I can understand the Articles of Confederation, what they were and why they failed. That is the first question of the test. The next question is I can explain the compromises that were reached during the Constitutional Convention. The next learning compromise has to do with the next learning target has to do with the Great Compromise, having to do with representation in government. The fourth one has to do with the Electoral College and the 3/5 compromise. And last, the ratification process. Who were the Federalists and who were the Anti-Federalists? Okay, so starting right off the bat, talk about the Articles of Confederation. The Articles of Confederation made a loose league of states. It was not like one national government. They had very little power. The national government basically could not do anything, had no power to tax, had no president. So the Articles of the Confederation did very little to control the people. And then comes Shays' Rebellion, which you read about. And Shays' Rebellion, proved to people that without a stronger government, at some point, some bad guy is going to get their hands on a bunch of guns and take this country over. And it will no longer belong to the people. So Shays' Rebellion really shocked people, and it made people realize that a stronger government was necessary. So then it comes to, the Constitutional Convention. The states are all sending delegates, which are representatives, and these delegates got to balance the different factions in the country, the different groups of people who want different things. The first major challenge is between the big states and the small states, dealing with whether all states should get equal votes or population should dictate how many votes you get into Congress. And that's how we came up with the Great Compromise. And very important, you had the New Jersey plan, supported by the small states that have 3 branches of government, but they only have 1 house. And then you have the Virginia plan that has 3 branches of government, but it has 2 houses. And both of those houses are based on population. So we have these 2 different plans. They got to come together for the Great Compromise. And this really has to do with how many votes you're getting, what your representation is in Congress. The next person that I want to talk about, there's not very many people in this chapter. This isn't a people chapter, but a person that's very important is James Madison. James Madison took really good notes. James Madison did a lot of studying, and because of this, he had more influence over the Constitution than really anyone else. Like when James Madison spoke about the Constitution, people listened. So James Madison is known as the father of the Constitution. He was not the first president. He was the 4th president. He was not a war hero in the Revolutionary War, but he knew the most about government because he had studied so much. So they call James Madison the father of the Constitution. Not because he wrote it by himself, but because of the amount of influence or power he had over it, because, he knew so much about government. Moving along, the Constitutional Convention had to settle on how to choose a chief executive. As you know, the chief executive is the president, and they are not elected by the popular vote. There is a thing called the Electoral College, and the states choose electors, and those states' electors pick the president. So if your state chooses candidate A, all of the electors from your state will also choose candidate A. So your vote counts toward winning your state, and then your state's votes all go into one candidate or the other. In order to make this Constitution the law, 9 out of 13 states had to ratify it. And in order to do that, they had to argue and argue and argue, and a lot of people were for it. They were called Federalists. There was a lot of people against it. They were called Anti-Federalists. The Federalists ended up writing some papers, like reports that got put in the newspaper, and these were called the Federalist Papers. And these are very, very important documents in American history about how government should run. The Federalist Papers were written by John Jay and James Madison and Alexander Hamilton. So they were all called the Federalists, and they wrote the Federalist Papers. Okay. Also on this test is going to be a couple of graphs. One of the graphs has to do with the 3/5 compromise. Has to do with how slaves would be counted towards population as it pertains to representation in Congress. If you need to rewind this video and listen to things that I say because I talk so fast, fine, do that. Don't just skip over it. So there are a couple of questions having to do with population graphs and who would benefit from, having representation based on population and who wouldn't. So we have those two things. And then on the back page, we have a thing called Frequently Asked Questions about the Constitutional Convention. And you have to read this document and then answer questions about it. One of the questions about it has to do with the word quorum. The word quorum. So I think that you want to look up the word quorum just so you get that question right. I think that if you have your packet complete, if you have completed your packet, pages 1 through 12, you should be well on your way to knowing the information for this chapter. This is a very big test right before the marking period. So good luck to you. God bless you, and God bless America. Boom.